through who's here. And not trusting my mind, I'm going to cheat. So we have Joe Riemann, and Joe is Riemann.
It's all right.
Joe Riemann.
Just call him Joe.
Joe. So Joe is finance director with the Land Stewardship Project right upstairs. And Joe is actually going to be speaking about an investment co-op that a concept that he's been working on with a number of people. And so glad to have Joe here. He's been in the co-op and related world for a long time. Worked at the Wedge in produce and research and development. He can certainly share more about that work as well. Has also worked at Equal Exchange. Sean Doyle is the general manager of Seward Community Co-op, and of course based right here in Minneapolis. And Sean is been there since from 2004, I believe, right? Before that, he was actually at NCDF, a loan officer, and worked with our organization. So glad to have him be able to share some from both of those experiences. And Sean, of course, has seen Seward through a major relocation and expansion in the last, I guess now 5 years.
Before.
Yeah, 6 years, 2007, 2008, right? Yeah.
No, we were in 2009, so it's just a little.
Oh, 2009. Okay, great. Melissa Cohen is our furthest traveler for our panel. I really appreciate her being here. So Melissa is the general manager with Isla Vista. Am I pronouncing that right? Great. With Isla Vista Food Co-op in Isla Vista, California. They are a recent member and borrower of NCDFs, and they really here to talk about their experience with crowdfunding. Melissa led a really terrific crowdfunding effort, and she'll be sharing more about that. And then Scott Patterson with Equal Exchange, just across the river in St. Paul. And of course, many of you will know Scott, both because he has been sort of the head of their Midwest Banana Program, or kind of been the face of that.
Wearing the banana suit, at least.
Literally the face of the bananas. And of course, before he was at Equal Exchange, he also worked with Peace Coffee. Most of you will know. And Peace Coffee, I guess you were there from '97 to about 2006.
9 years, yeah.
Great. Right. So these are our panels. I'll let them introduce themselves and talk more about their projects and organizations, and then we'll be taking questions and answers. I think we're going to start with you, Sean, right?
Sure. And I'm actually going to talk about something other than my co-op first. Some other people are going to talk, and then I'm going to talk about my co-op. And one of the things that is a challenge, I'm going to talk about what we're calling the Merry-Grove Fund, because it's a lot nicer sounding than the high-risk loan fund. But also, my understanding of the history of NCDF is that it was founded out of some efforts that happened at, I believe, Merry-Grove Co-op, which is a predecessor of the Mississippi Market. So it just seemed like a really good point to touch back to in the naming of it. And so what it is that, frequently in our sector there are cooperatives that are trying to get financing to do projects like startups or relocations and the like, and often they have inadequate collateral. And so the loan, while otherwise they have a sound plan and the possibility of a really good performance after that project, it's a hard thing to underwrite because of the deficiency of collateral. So we've often been approached as being one of the larger co-ops to do collateral enhancement transactions at NCDF. We have 2 on our books right now. One is Harvest Moon in Long Lake. I'm always forgetting what town they're in, on the very western edge of the Twin Cities. And the other one is Spiral in Hastings. So what happens is we put a chunk of money in to NCDF that is segregated and allows for collateral enhancement for that particular loan. What has been, problematic in my mind around that is it's always ad hoc, and it's always something that is in a reactive mode. you're being asked to help out, and it's like you're reacting to a situation as opposed to actually having a programmatic element that actually supports this kind of development. And one thing that we don't want to do as a cooperative is to do direct loans to our peer cooperatives, or because it just puts us in an unsavory position, and we would much rather use the loan fund that we created 35 years ago to do this. And so, we're willing to have a degree of risk. We feel that, because of the peer networks we have, if there's a store that's not performing well, we can provide them with support. We have a national association that we've been in meetings with for the last few days. So if I come disjointed, it's because I've been in meetings since Saturday, and my brain's a little bit addled. But so we're not really interested in that. So we of having the direct investments in the co-ops. We also we find it sort of frustrating that when we do those investments that securitize those loans, they're tied up for the full 5 years of the term, and so the money's being static at that point. It can't be as productive as we'd like to do it, and we're willing to put that certain amount of money at risk, but make it more with the program like Grove, make it more fluid, so that as principal is being paid into that loan, as that cooperative has proven its track record, maybe the risk rating lowers at NCDF, some of that collateral enhancement could then be freed up for another co-op facing that same underwriting challenge. And so the idea is that we want it to be able to turn more quickly. And so, we see this as a structural need. So I went to Christina and said, can you help us create this idea? And so we started the conversation about 1.5 years ago around this. One of the key partners in this kind of development has been the Wedge. There was a change in leadership at the Wedge where it was sort of like on hold, and so now we're revisiting it. And one of the challenges, of course, is there's a lot of places to place your money, and there's other development. There's a fund being created by the NCGA as well. So it's really determining if there's enough members to make it a viable proposition. So it's in the idea stage yet, but it's something that hopefully we get a little traction on.
Great. Sorry, Sean, appreciate that. And then we're going to turn to Scott, and then back to Sean, and then Melissa, and then Joe as the order.
That sounds great. I think I was put in second position because we agreed that Equal Exchange was classic, or it was classic, and I think I'm still having a hard time getting my head around that, but I'll take that for today. So, I am classic. I've never been called that before, so it feels good.
No, you haven't been called classy.
Yeah, oh, that's it. Sorry. Thank you. Awesome.
Banana.
You've been called banana. So, no, it's really good to be here. Thank you. Sort of when I was thinking about this, and some of you were in the presentation yesterday at the NCGA event, so I'll try not to duplicate too much of that. There's a little bit of equal exchange capital talk there, but I'll try and add some elements here. But when I was thinking about this topic, and some of the themes that have been continuous through this are that obviously co-ops are innovators, and they take risk, and they can take risk on a mission level, right? And so when I was thinking about the capitalizing cooperatives question, I kept coming back to this idea of your money, your sources, your capital being in alignment with your mission, right? So that you have the ability to fulfill your mission, right? And that's really what this is about, is aligning the sources so that you're best able to get done what you are here to do on the planet, what you want to do. And rather than, I'm going to share a little bit in a minute about just the pie chart, essentially, of Equal Exchange's capital makeup and our breakout, but I wanted to talk about two scenarios or examples on how our capital has impacted or not our actual operations and what we're here to do again in the world, our mission, so that interplay between capital and mission. And then at the end, I'll just kind of close and hopefully turn it over to some more of the new innovative instead of classic stuff going on. So, but when I thought about this whole capitalization question, one thing that came to mind was Equal Exchange's banana business. And back in, just a little context for that, right? Back in 2008, 2009, there was this banana company called OK USA, which was started in 2004 by one of Equal Exchange's founders, Jonathan Rosenthal. And he went on to sort of create this business essentially to try and be the first fair trade fresh fruit company in the US. A ludicrous scenario, right? And just as ludicrous as trying to be a fair trade, 100% fair trade coffee company 27 years ago, right? So, and they did some amazing work, but they were also, the banana business is insane, and they were also losing money on bananas because it's such a brutal business. So in 08, 09, I think they were approximately about $400,000 in the hole. And there was, Equal Exchange was a 10% supporter at that point, and there was this major decision point, right? Are we going to close this business down, or are we going to continue to try and do something? And it was a really dynamic time, and there were tons of debates, and there was politicking within Equal Exchange, and it was a really wild time, and Joe here was politicking to continue the program, as was I, in the Twin Cities. And the worker owners ended up voting in that December of that year to decide to continue and basically take a majority stake in this failing business to keep it alive. And I think the vote was something like 76-4 or 2. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be close, right? This is going to be razor thin. But it actually wasn't. And it was a really powerful moment for the organization to be able to take on, again, a mission risk like that and to put capital behind that. And to do that for small farmers, right? Which is what essentially we think we're on the planet to do, which is to build small farmer supply chains. And so in thinking about that moment, what investors would actually support that, right? Oh my gosh, this thing is hemorrhaging cash, they're running out of fuel, the plane is going down, who's going to pour more money into that except for mission-based people, right? Who might think they have a chance at this. And so in that moment, the fact that Equal Exchange that didn't have to go to outside investors, that decision didn't have to go to another realm of folks, allowed us to take that stand and to make that decision. And I think that's a really powerful moment. So I'll use that as a segue to try and describe our pie chart of how we actually do capitalize the business and how that plays out. Right now we have, I believe, 105 worker owners who own all the common stock in Equal Exchange, all the voting shares, or the A shares, right? So those are the people who voted to invest in the banana company, and they get to vote on all major operational changes and decisions. They vote and elect the board of directors, which is made up of 3 Equal Exchange worker owners and 6 Equal Exchange worker owners and 3 outsiders, so 9 people total, and that's the governance model. And they basically are the governing body of the organization, right? And they hold the Class A shares. So each share right now is approximately a little over $3,000, and that's pegged annually to inflation. So when you become a worker owner, after a year of being at Equal Exchange, you get hopefully voted in to be in the co-op, and then your responsibility as an owner at that point is to buy one of these Class A shares, and you can do that over time. But then you are part of the co-op. The other way that we've capitalized the business, and obviously that, when you look at it, we often say we're worker owner controlled, but investor owned, essentially, because when you see the next piece of the pie, the worker owner portion is not the biggest. We'll get to that. So the other way we've capitalized it, and I think the founders would say that it's been a lot of luck and some accident. When they started the company, they begged and borrowed for $100,000, and they told their friends, you're probably never going to see this, and thank you very much, we're going to go try and do something. And they also got a bunch of friendly money from a group of nuns and other interfaith folks who were really instrumental early on. And so that was some of the early capital, and then they developed the classic part of our model, I think, that we've tried to share and has been duplicated in a really positive way is our preferred stock element to our business, and that is the Class B preferred shares that we offer. And those are, we currently have just under 500 shareholders of that. For all our years in business, 27 years, I think we've paid a dividend 26 out of 27, and we target a return of 5%. So I targeted a return of 5% on those preferred shares. Right now, the share price is, it hasn't always been this high, it's $10,000 a share. We're currently not taking any new offerings because we simply have, a lot of people have wanted to in recent years, and so we've been very lucky to have that essentially fill up to where we need it right now. But there have been times in our history when people would sort of look at it and be like, well, I can make 23% in the stock market, why would I want to take 5, right? That was the mindset in the late 90s, right? And but right now, luckily, we've been in a period where people are pretty excited about 5%. And they're very willing to trade. People are always like, you're never going to get anyone who's going to want to put their money in that and not have voting rights. We actually have, right? It's pretty wild. And so that type of committed money has been invaluable to our growth and support. So right now in that pond, we've got just under $11 million. And some of the shareholders in that pond are consumer co-ops. Some of you in this room are investors in that as co-ops, probably an individual or two. And we also have a farmer group in Mexico. The Usiri Co-op owns some preferred stock. And then the worker owners, the portion of our patronage that's retained in our internal capital accounts goes to purchase Class B shares for us, and that sits as equity in the business, and that's about $1 million. And if you lump us together, we would be the largest shareholder. So moving along in sort of the capital model, my second analogy is about 5 years ago, we were in a position as a business to both invest in the banana company around that period, and also we were considering, things are going well, let's try and give back more money to farmers and maybe even preferred Class B shareholders. Let's put more money out there. And when we were considering this, all of a sudden the finance director says, wait a second, oh my gosh, as we started down that road, we can't do that because the bank says that we have to maintain one of our bank loan covenants was to require 3% profitability. And that was a real wake-up call for the organization because we thought we were pretty free to make decisions that we wanted to make. And all of a sudden, whoa, we can't actually, even if we wanted to do that, we can't do that. Oh my gosh, that kind of freaked us out a little bit. So from that period going forward, in an evolving way, we're still on this path to transition towards what we call trying to get all our money from committed investors versus conventional shareholders, right? Bank money versus committed participants or investors. So we're in this effort to try and figure out how to make the traditional pond, the slice of that pie, way smaller, and get as much of it as we can, transition that to the more committed pond. And one way we've done that is we started a CD program, a Certificate of Deposit program, with Eastern Bank. And that was started probably 4 years ago. And it's open to any investor, and there's a $500 minimum. You make a 3-year commitment to it. But basically what this creative program does is if an individual signs up for it, they're saying to the bank, yes, I would like you to loan equal exchange money at a low interest rate on a line of credit, and if equal exchange defaults, you can take my money. And we've had a lot of people sign up for that. So that's up to $1 million. Crazy, right? So like, wow. So that's been very, productive. And I think we're continuing on this move to transition to committed capital sources. And one thing that the person that I talked to, our capital coordinator, Dan Fireside, wanted me to share with you all too is we want to be, we definitely have a long way to go in our business trajectory, but we are sort of in this place where we don't necessarily need new money right now today, but we want to be a resource for all of anyone who does, if we can help share our bylaws, our documents that have helped do the preferred stock offerings, anything we can do we want to put that out there, and he wanted me to push that because he's getting called all the time. Hey, I want to invest money in equal exchange. I'm sorry, our offering isn't open right now, but do you know where I can go? Well, he's always trying to compile that list. So I think part of what the energy about for me today is let's keep sharing the resources and building those lists and capitalizing the co-op economy. One other thing I will say is, one of the hard things that's sort of strange about our model is you have a lot of that 11 million and it's less than 500 people. And to me there's sort of I don't know if it's a contradiction, but there's this element of that's not quite perfect, right? That's pretty great that we got all those committed investors, but there's this element that our whole mission as an organization is to essentially give power to farmers and to democratize the trade system, to build democratic, more economically just supply chains, right? And when you have a model that is built on a minimum investment for a Class B share of $10,000, that's pretty hard. There's this gap there, right? So we're thinking about this and wrestling with this, and I'll leave it at that, but that's been some of the incentive for what you may hear later. Thank you.
Back to me.
Back to you.
And if you wouldn't mind passing out the sheet, I'll start talking. So Seward Co-op is in just a couple neighborhoods over to the north and east of here. We're a cooperative that was formed in 1972. It's we celebrated our 40th anniversary last year. This is a slide from a larger presentation, just because the focus of this topic was on member capital. I thought this slide in particular was a very helpful slide to just illustrate the kind of thinking that we have in our leadership and our board. I actually have two board members in the room right now, which is pretty great, Dan Nordley and Joe here. And so, and my finance manager Alex is here as well. But so it's a little bit out of context. That is pulled out of another presentation, and it was actually an earlier draft, and the word shares is misspelled, and it was in color. But just because I was the only slide, it wasn't worth having the PowerPoint up for that. It made more sense just to make a quick copy and pass it out. So in 2009, we moved into our new home at 28th and Franklin. It was a doubling of our cooperative. Before we moved, we were doing about 12 million annual sales. We had probably about 150, maybe 140 employees. And this year, our fiscal year will end on June 30th, and we will be doing 30 million in this fiscal year, and we have about 220 employees. Just to sort of get a sense of the scale of our business. The thing that we did with our cooperative was start out with to capitalize the $10.5 million project, which was our relocation project. We had a New Markets tax credit deal, which I am not going to try to explain in this meeting. There's some really talented folks in this room who probably can do a better job anyway, and I'm looking at our auditor on that one. I understand it pretty well, but well enough for a general manager to make it work. But Alex has a pretty good clue on this too. But anyway, we need to raise $1.5 million from our members to capitalize our store. Historically, how cooperatives in our sector have raised member capital has been through member loans. Member loans are subordinated investments in the co-op with a fixed rate of return and a fixed term. You'll see on the chart the lowest dark gray area was our member loans. We raised $1.2 million in our member loan campaign. And one thing, having really the experience of working at the loan fund, that raised my greater understanding of finance was the importance of equity in a transaction, the importance of ownership. And so at that time was the first time we actively promoted our C stock, our C shares, which are like preferred shares, which are $500 increments, and we committed to paying a 5% dividend on them, and the dividend can only be paid if there's enough profit in the business in that year. And so for the first time, we really communicated and promoted the idea of buying preferred shares in the co-op. One of the reasons why, in my mind, was the similar thing that Scott was saying about the size of loans. To get to 1.5 million, the incremental base size we figured could not be less than $5,000. But we also have a lot of members that are not of that kind of means, and we didn't want to leave them out of the opportunity to support the co-op and its growth. And one particular stakeholder group that we really very strongly felt like we wanted to participate in this were the employees. And so we created an employee stock match so employees could participate in it. And it's a very simple thing where it goes through payroll withholdings. They put in 25 bucks a pop, and after they get to the first 250, if they only want to do that, that's good. We'll match a half a share there. Then when they get to the second 250, the second share is matched. They do have a tax implication for the match portion, but we had quite a few employees take part in that. I forget what the detail of the 240 was. It's probably maybe 20 to 30,000 of the 240 were from employees who, it probably wasn't even that much, but we did have a number of them. So then the other numbers on this chart are patronage equity. So when we do our patronage refund every year, we have a real, I started my co-op career in Seward almost 23 years ago. And there's been this understanding at the leadership table, the board table, and I've had the pleasure of serving on the board a couple times throughout that time, about the importance of retaining equity on the patronage refund and building commonwealth. And we've only recently kind of started to frame it as building commonwealth, that this is not divisible. We used to say more like, yeah, as long as we don't need when we stop needing new equipment, we'll retire patronage refund equity. But instead of framing it more forward, is that no, we're building commonwealth for future generations so that the co-op is here for the long haul. And then the final one is the member stock. It's $75 stock that a member who joins the co-op buys when they join. And then the final piece of equity is just classic earnings, $153,000. So our cooperative was tremendously successful with this relocation, and we really took our thinking and applied it going forward on the success that we had. So, our first member loans were originated about 6 years ago, leading up to the project, and so they have been coming mature, and so what our offer to members who want to stay invested in the co-op is that they can invest in C-Stock. And so about a third of our members with their loans retiring have done so. The other thing is that we also decided after the campaign was done that we would just have a permanent C-Stock offering. Not just make it a special time whenever the co-op needed capital, but having a continual message of this is a place that's a good place, probably the most socially responsible place that you can put your money into, and it'll pay a fair rate of return. It's 5%, it's not a huge rate of return, but it's a fair rate of return. And so we actually have a lot of members who come in and buy C-Stock through word of mouth, or they'll talk to Alex for hours on end, and he'll explain to them how it all works. And Alex does a fine job of convincing them that, yeah, we're a pretty good deal, because we are. But then the really big piece here, if you look on that second table, this is from December of 2012. Actually, one thing I want to say still about the preferred shares in 2012, we continue to sell them. At this point, we're closer to $1 million in C-Stock, partly because there's the spring is when a lot of member loans are coming due and people are converting. But again, we just have people coming in. Recently, we had a guy coming in by $100,000 of C-Stock. The other thing is just the employee match starts in the new beginning of the year. So the first quarter seems to be a higher level of C-Stock. So at this point, about 10% of our C-Stock is employee owned. I had Alex kind of crunch the numbers recently. I think we're about 950,000 in C-Stock, and about 90,000 of those are from employees who've chosen to do the match now over, I think, 6 or 7 years. So there's a good ownership build that we're having in the co-op. The other more, really dynamic element though is our retained patronage. We've built $1.8 million of equity in the co-op through the patronage refunds that we've been doing the past years. And that is really a powerful way to build equity in the business as well. Membership stock now is less than our C stock, though we continue to have about 100 new members a month. But the increment is smaller, and then finally just, you can see in that whole period of time, our actual retained earnings didn't really grow a whole lot. It actually went below into a negative for 1 year before rebounding back into the positive. But, so that's sort of, our overview of our member capital. We're sort of classic 2 with a few twists, and that's why I got to go second. Well, you had some twists. I didn't realize how many twists you had at yours.
I held back a few.
Yeah, this conference call, we talked over the order of things and all that. So that's the Seward member capital story.
Okay. Ours is different. Thanks for having me also. It's always interesting to sit in panels such as these that I've been doing more of since this crazy story called Project We Own It manifested itself. And so I guess the story sort of begins. I've been the general manager of our co-op for a couple of years. I've worked at the co-op since I was 21, so it's been about 10 years, the better part of 10 years that I've been in our store doing a variety of different things. So I consider myself still pretty new to general management. Especially considering that our co-op is located adjacent to UC Santa Barbara. So the demographic of our store is, at this point, I surmise about 90% college students. College students give us about 3 years of solid shopping. Our average basket is $15. Some days our customer count can swell above 700, and students will spend $5. And so our store runs a really different sort of operation in that we have about 3 to 5 years and we lose 90% of our shoppers in that cycle. And so inherent in that is a lot of re-education that has to happen to capture these young people as quickly as possible so we can have customer shopping in our store while they're going to school in Santa Barbara. And so that's a little bit about kind of how our store makes itself out. In my other realm, I'm a project manager at a festival called Burning Man. Burning Man is a really big festival. If you're on the West Coast, you might have heard of it more. It attracts about 60,000 people that build a temporary city in the Nevada desert. It's a really big part of my life also. And so with my experience doing very large-scale project management at Burning Man, and I'm talking about overseeing events that feed like 10,000 people, like very large-scale projects, I have come to learn a lot of different methods of capitalizing these projects so that we can execute on this level that for some people is sort of hard to understand why you put so much into something that's temporary. A lot of the cooperative principles actually are replicated a lot out there at Burning Man, and I do that conversation a lot also. But in the interest of this, what I'll talk about is this concept of crowdfunding. So when our co-op has been, and I have to move around a little bit. I'm not used to sitting when I talk. It's tough. So our co-op has been in the same location for 32 of its 40 years. This is our 48th year. I'm actually going to go back and jump into 40th anniversary party planning that I have 2 weeks to finish. So we have been tenants. We had a really hands-off landlord situation, which is pretty common for Isla Vista. And so we've done all of our building maintenance for years, and we've been very happy in our location. It's a small store. It's about 3,800 square feet total, about $3 million a year in sales, a little bit less than that. So I was out in the desert running my huge project, and I came back to an email from our property manager that our landlord had decided to sell. And they were giving the co-op 10 days to decide if we wanted to buy our building. Right. Yeah. Our co-op historically, not that profitable. At the time we had $165,000 in our checking account. And so the asking price for the building was $1.625 million. And we sat as a board and we huddled about this. Our lease was set to expire in December of 2013. And so where I sat as the general manager and also like the person who's probably been most personally affected by this co-op in the past 10 years of my life, I saw 3 different options. Of course, there was the easy option where we were just like, ignore the email and be like, oh, thanks, but no thanks. This is just impossible. We have $100,000 in the bank. How are we going to do this? What that would mean is that our lease could be renewed next year, but the retail spaces in Isla Vista has been going through a serious phase of gentrification. There's big new buildings, it's very development friendly. The average retail price per square foot in new commercial space is $4 a square foot. And so our rent was about $275 a square foot. We're paying about $8,000 a month just to keep the doors open. And so, whereas part of me was like, well, we could just re-sign a lease and keep our fingers crossed that the person that buys the building also has a vested interest in our co-op. That would be cool. Probably unlikely. The other option would have been that potentially the lease could have been renewed, but our building is zoned for 3-story mixed-use commercial residential, which is the trajectory of all the build-outs that are happening in Isla Vista right now. And so there's that part that was, well, we could just lose the co-op, which was also totally possible. And so the third option, less likely to occur, was that we could buy the building. So of course I went that way because, I'm a doer, and I think that if you put your mind to something and you kind of really think about it, you can make things happen. And so I got the board on board with that, and off we went. We put in, we responded that we had an intent to purchase. I went, and I have to say, I set up here with very little experience in this is my only experience actually doing this. So I learned from October until January the whole process of fundraising on this level and also commercial property purchasing, all while running a tiny, crazy little store. And so what ended up happening in this journey is that this concept of crowdfunding was the first thing that kind of came out of my mouth. And I was like, well, we're going to have to come up with a down payment of around $425,000. How are we going to get that money? And so, again, going back to the demographic of our store, we've done a member loan campaign. In 2010, we did a remodel of the front of our store, and I wish I did have slides to show you guys who we are. But it was really hard to do a member loan campaign because we don't really have that pool of people to pull from. Similarly to how Sean was speaking, I don't have a lot of people that I can ask $5,000 of. I gave the co-op $5,000 when we did our member loan campaign. The former GM was the biggest lender. So we had like 10 people step forward, and that was just to do the front of the store. That was $70,000, and we're talking now about $400,000, if not more.